Amy Marie. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking buttons. There are many different kinds of buttons and there are many different ways to sew on buttons. So we are going to tackle 3 different button scenarios. And within there I'm going to point out tips that are universal when you're sewing on any kind of button. But I'm going to walk you through the specifics step by step for these 3.
Alright, here we go. First up, the small 4-hole flat button, often found on your dress shirt. We are going to sew this onto a classic button-up. Second, we have a large 4-hole flat button. We are going to sew this onto a thicker garment. So how you would do it if you need to sew it onto a sweater or a jacket, because you need to allow for the extra space behind the button because of the thicker material. And the last one, this lovely vintage metal button, a little Canadiana. This one has the loop on the back, which is called the shank. These are often found on your winter coats. The shank is specifically designed to allow for extra space for thicker fabric. Here's my well-loved denim shirt, and we're going to reattach this bottom little button. So first, you want to find your thread color. So you can always look towards the other buttons if you're not sure what color thread to find. You're going to cut a reasonable amount, about 24 inches, because you are going to fold it in half. Then you're going to thread your needle, and you're going to make sure you've got a lovely little knot at the end, and then we're ready to go. Button placement. So have your shirt laid out nice and flat to make sure that the buttonholes are all lined up. Newly fallen buttons, you may find a few lingering threads or a button indent, which is a good indication of where the button should be placed. To start, we're going to put the needle about 1 inch below where we actually want the button to be placed. This is going to help us hide the tail of your thread and stop it from unraveling. So push the needle between the 2 pieces of fabric so you don't see on either side. Then you're going to come up where we want the button to be. We're going to cut off the end of those threads later. Now we found our starting spot, we're going to do a double tack. So that's just 2 stitches to secure the thread. We got 1 and 2. So you're going to come back up to the front now that we've got our secured starting spot, and we're going to add the button. Because this is a 4-hole button, there are many different ways to stitch it on. You could do an X, you could do a square, you could do 2 lines. It's a design choice. We're going to look at the other buttons, and we see that they have done an X, so that's what we're going to do. So make sure your button is lined up on your shirt the same as the other buttons. So now you're going to go back through a different hole in the button, all the way to the back, trying to stay close to where our original stitches are. And you can make it nice and snug. Come back up a different hole because we're making our X. And then back in a different hole and out through the bottom. 4 times is the magic number to make sure your button is nice and secure. There we go. Number 4. All right. So the button is basically on. So we're going to do a little trick to help keep it nice and secure. So go back up, but you're going to stay at the bottom of the button, so you're not going through the holes. Coming up underneath, you're going to do a little loop around. That's going to secure and pull all the stitches nice and tight. Look at that, nice and snug. And come back out the bottom. And now we're going to do another little kind of tack, where you're actually going to sew around your stitches. It's going to make sure that they can't come unraveled. So we're going to do 4 again, so that's 2. There's 3. And there's 4. Look at that, super secure. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to have to take our needle out the opposite way, but the same thing as the beginning. It's going to go between the 2 pieces. So we're going to hide our end tail of the thread. So come out the end, then we're going to snip it, and we're going to go and snip off the end from the beginning, a little knot there so you can't see it, and so it's hidden in the seam. And there we go. Button done. That button's going nowhere. Alright, so the next one, first few steps are all the same. We've got our thread and our knot at the end. We've got our button, and we're going to find our button placement. We've got a little indentation there. We're going to take into account the thicker fabric, so we're going to make a few adjustments. So we're going to start about 1 inch below, sneak the needle in between the 2 pieces of fabric, pop up at the button location, do a little double tack, and then add the button. So with this button, we see that the other ones were done with the 2 lines. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to pop it back through the hole above it, back in very close to where we currently stitched it. The difference here is we're not going to make it snug. So you got to give yourself a little bit of space behind the button. And we're still accounting for the alignment, making sure we're in the right spot. Back up, back through, again keeping it a little loose. And again, the magic number 4. So you only need to do 4 stitches. Great. And then after the 4 stitches, you come back up underneath like we did in the first one. And we're going to do a little loop knot around. But for this one, we're actually going to do it the 4 times. By doing this, we are actually creating a little wrap around the stitches that we made, and those stitches are now going to become the core. We're kind of making our own little shank out of thread. This is going to help secure the button and keep that space behind it. Perfect. So you can see the space. It's nice and tight. Great. And then the last few steps are all the same. So you come back out through the bottom. And then we're going to tack around the stitches that we did. There's the first one. And 2, 3, 4. And then sneak the needle back through the 2 pieces of fabric. So we're going to hide that tail again. There we go. And we'll go in and snip it. And then find the one from the beginning and snip that. And there we go. Wait a minute. Hold the phone. My buttons aren't lined up. Their lines are going one way and my lines are going the other way. Oops. It's a good idea to keep an eye on your button alignment as you go because they can be tricky. We're sticking with the same jacket, but we're adding an accent button at the top with this lovely little vintage button. So, you know all the first steps now. You are a pro. You've got your thread, you've got your knot at the end, you're going to find your button placement, you're going to sneak the needle in, but an inch away from it, do a little double tack, and there we go. So now we're adding the button on. So with this button, there's a few things to consider. This one has a pattern, so you want to make sure the pattern is going the right direction, button alignment. And also with the back, there's the shank. So you want to make sure that the widest part of the shank lines up with the widest part of the button hole to help with the ease of the button going through. If it's lined up the wrong way, you'll see it looks like that. And that's going to make it more difficult for your button to go through the hole. Alright, so we're going to sew the button on. You just have to loop your needle through the shank, that metal loop at the back, and then you're going to sew it back through the jacket. And you can go nice and snug on this. We don't need to worry about giving ourselves extra space because the shank itself is already designed to give us all the space we need. So you can make it nice and snug. So we're going to do 4 stitches, our magic number 4. That's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. And then we're going to come back up beside the button. So this last one here, we're not going through the loop at the back. You're just sneaking it in behind it. And we are going to do one little loop knot around just for security, just to make it nice and tight. Boom. There we go. We're nice and snug. And then the last few steps are the same, and you got this. Go back through. You're going to tack around the stitches that you already did. 3, 4, and sneak it back through so we can hide the tail and snip them off. And then we're done. Super neat and tidy at the back, and then nice and snug. Look at that. Super cute. Thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully this will help you find some button security so you can get out there and find cool buttons, add them to stuff, have fun, go crazy. You can always pop over and find me on Instagram at Wallace Reed, my personal account at The Real Amy Marie Wallace. See ya!